All right, we are now live.
Okay, good evening, everybody. It's our Ukiah Unified School District regular board meeting of December 14th, 2020. Welcome to our meeting. Let's get started. We are reconvening an open session after a closed session, and we're going to start with the flag salute. Ian, can you put the flag on our screen, please? And can we all rise for the flag salute? Okay, ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, do we have any report out from closed session? Deb, could you capture that for me, please?
Absolutely. On item B, there was a vote to reject the claim from Mendocino Woodlands Camp Associations Incorporated. And the vote was taken to reject the claim, and the vote was 7-0 roll call vote. And then regarding item B8, consideration of classified leaves of absence, the board heard about 3 of those, and it was moved and seconded to approve a leave of absence request. That was approved roll call vote to 7-0. On the second leave of absence request, it was moved and seconded to deny the unpaid leave of absence request. That vote was 7-0 with the roll call vote. And on the third leave of absence request, it was moved and seconded to approve the leave of absence request for a classified employee, and that was the vote was 7-0 roll call vote. And
okay. Thank you. Moving on to item C4, this is an approval of the agenda. I do want to note there is one change. We are not having item G1, which was student readmissions, because there are no students to readmit right now. So that is off the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Or if there's any changes or questions, now would be the time.
I move to approve the agenda.
I think Trustee Barrett is seconding with a wave, but she's muted, so I'm going to go
second.
Okay, so motion made by Trustee Fernandez, seconded by Barrett to approve the agenda with the elimination of item G1. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. I'm seeing hellos, seeing nods, and anybody opposed? And it's abstentions? No. Okay. Moving on to item C5, student advisor report. Mason Hoppy, tell us what's going on.
All right, so this Wednesday, the 16th, we will be having the first blood drive of the school year. And this blood drive is actually especially important because due to the pandemic, a lot of blood drives across the country have been canceled. So it's really important that they get as many people in as possible. And the latest update on the sign-up count is that they're mostly full, but they still have around 5 spots open, and they're hoping to fill them in the next 2 days. So we'll see how that goes. They're going to be in the cafeteria, but spread out at a safe distance, and they'll be doing temperature checks before they enter the building. Pods are continuing to happen with clubs and sports, but the CIF has pushed back the high school sports season to January, and that might change again, we don't know. As for clubs, they have been continuing to meet, although not much has been happening in the way of like mock trial and science Olympiad, although mock trial did have its first virtual scrimmage against the Developing Virtue School in Talmadge, and that went well. UHS Choir performed their virtual holiday concert on Friday, and that was recorded and is still online for people to enjoy on their website. Counseling staff has been available to students every day with drop-in emotional counseling at lunch, and links and information are available to students on the school-wide Google Classroom Wildcat Nation. Other than that, Wildcats are just finishing up the semester and preparing for finals for when we reconvene in January.
Great. Thank you, Mason. Any questions for Mason or comments? Thanks for joining us virtually and keeping us updated in this very strange year. Before we move on, Trustee Mogart, I'm just checking in with you. You were connecting to audio for a very long time and now I can't see you in video. Can you unmute and just tell me you are there? Trustee Mogart. So I'm not sure if she's here. I will try to check in with her a little later again. Are you there?
I am here. I am so sorry. I am, of course, having crazy connection issues, but I can completely hear you all.
Okay,
And
when
I
you
will
can join us by video.
get my video as soon as I can.
Okay, we'll be happy to see your face when we can. Okay, item C6 for public comment for items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment for items not on the agenda? Superintendent Cuban?
None
Debbie?
received.
None received, okay. Item C7, acceptance of donations. Do we have donations? Sorry, I'm flicking to my other screen here. We do have some donations. Do we have a motion to accept the donation list for December 2020?
Yes, I move to accept the donation list for $113 for this month.
Okay, do we have a second?
A
Okay.
second,
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Argan. All those in
with
favor?
gratitude.
Great. We have a motion to accept the donation with gratitude and seconded by Trustee Arkin. All those in favor? Aye. Okay.
Aye.
And anybody opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, thank you. So we're moving on to item C8A. I'm noting for the record that our CSEA representative is not here, and I know she wanted to be, so we do not have a report from the California School Employees Association. But I do see that Terry DeSelke is here, and we're ready for your report. Terry.
All right, thank you and good evening. And Mason, I'm so glad to hear that there are counselors available every day at the high school. That's good to know. UTA would like to thank Dr. Corrin for the time that he gave to us to share his perspective and understanding of COVID and schools. We'd also like to thank the board for the standing desks, the extra monitors, the chairs, the glasses, all of your help in getting those things to us as quickly as possible. We really appreciate the way that you listen to teachers' concerns. Thank you. We are appreciative that we are continuing to collect PPE and protect our students and our staff. And that's always going to be an ongoing thing. We know that we have small groups and the protocols are helping to keep people safe and healthy. So we really appreciate that. We have had great success in the digital classrooms, fostering community in those classrooms. And teachers have built routines to increase attendance and engagement. The Zooms are open. The Google Meets are meeting. People are getting there at 8 o'clock when school starts. And we really appreciate that things are running smoothly as possible right now during this time. And happy holidays, everybody. I really appreciate everything that everybody does for our students, for our staff, and for our community. And I will be leaving a little bit early tonight. I just can't sit for very long. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Moving to C9, leadership team report. Chris Francis, are you here? You can put your video on now. We'd be happy to see you.
Okay. Well, good evening, trustees and Superintendent Cuban. I'm glad to be able to present the leadership report for this week. I want to share my screen real quick here. Okay, can everybody see the PowerPoint slide?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to get started with some of the leadership work that's been going on in the virtual realm right now. Working a lot with the California Principal Support Network with Dr. Maney, continuing that work with quite a few administrators here with our leadership teams with certificated staff. We've been working a lot on developing learning targets and I can statements. That's where unpacking the standards and drilling down to that specific learning that we can address and teachers can create learning targets. And then those learning targets, ideally, would then start to create common formative assessments. Those quick assessments that the teachers create, that they review in their grade levels to inform instruction as they move on. And then also we've been looking really closely at the elements of effective teams. It's been a way that we can begin to reflect on our teaming structure as we are like adult learners. And we've been working with Dr. Maney to create a site implementation guide that has to do with creating some specific anchor standards about what each one of our grade level teams look like. And we're working with our grade level teams then to identify some areas, 3 areas, like they identified as gold standard, reaching standard or beginning, and identifying where each team is and where we can put the rest of our, majority of our effort in preparing our teams to implement more of the PLC work. Next thing is that we've been working a lot. There's been 2 meetings with the equity group work that's being facilitated by Hanover Research. In our first 2 meetings, we've been able to review some of the data that was collected through the survey. In our last meeting last week, I think it was pretty exciting. The site administrators were able to meet with their team groups, their site level team groups, and having a really good discussion about what everybody's initial perspectives were when they just saw the data quickly that was presented on the evening. I think it has it's laying the foundation for some really productive conversations, and I think hopefully we'll end up being a really good problem-solving approach to addressing some of the equity that people see here at our school district. Finally, is I think something that everybody's been spending a lot of time on, and it's a lot of work, but developing the return to site-based instruction plans. And I think, the principal's been working really hard on addressing and working out different scheduling and what that looks like on each one of the different sites as we prepare to have kids return back to school. Preparing the plants for safety, identifying ingress and egress, developing our safety plans in collaboration with district maintenance and operations staff, and getting all those details down. It's as you start to dive deeply into the work and trying to balance the health order with the practicality of running a school site, there's a lot of details that come up. So it's been a good process of looking at our systems, identifying all the materials and all the preparation that's been happening at this point, and getting ready to be able to return to site-based instruction when we can. There's been a lot of stakeholder education. I know the district had sent out the parent handbook that went over some of the hygiene and some of the expectations for returning to school during this time of COVID. There's been a lot of good information out to families, and that's been good. And it's also been good for us because we've been meeting with our staff members, we're meeting with some of the different collaborative groups and having really good conversations about what it looks like to return to site. And just working through that information. We've also been working on getting some different stakeholder engagement input. Beyond just the district surveys of distance or hybrid is going out and collecting information from the community and from CSEA representatives and certificated representatives, along with those collaborative groups, trying to have as much discussion as possible and getting as much information as we can. So we begin to work out plans and work through some of the issues or opportunities that are coming up as we work through the plan. So that's been a lot, that's been consuming a lot of administrative time right now. That's about it for the leadership part of it. Okay, now I'm gonna go on and talk a little bit about Oak Manor. Oak Manor with the positive culture stuff that we're working on right now. We do have our awards. I'll be recording another monthly awards ceremony that we will push out on Thursday evening, identifying kids for being safe, responsible, respectful as we go through. We obviously have our student of the month that we continue to work on. But something that's been actually really fun and special this year has been our student council. So we have a CSEA rep, Kyle Nuss, and a CTA, a teacher, Christina Loomis, who are co-chairing and organizing the student council group. And the student council group works on creating video updates and messages to the staff that we push out. And then they're able, so just to give an example of some of the videos and stuff that they do tips on distance learning by kids, for kids. They've done different topics that they've been concerned about. They've announced, kids' birthdays, and it's really just kind of an uplifting, fun thing, having the kids do the videos and pushing it out. They've also been organizing Spirit Weeks. We're in the midst of a Spirit Week right now, where today was a wacky hair or dress day. I'd like to say I shaved my head for the event, but that didn't, I mean, that doesn't really count. But the Spirit Weeks have been really fun. There's a picture of it, a couple of pictures over here. In October, we did a Cancer Awareness Month. We had a Spirit Week that culminated with all the kids wearing pink. And also we interviewed one of our staff members who is working through some of that right now. So it was a really good community building activity that really was driven by the kids. And then of course we have the beach day that we had just recently. So for the social emotional part of it, we're really thankful. Even though our counselor has been out this year so far, we worked with the district and we were able to secure Christine Price and Christina Cruz to be working with us for this beginning of the school year through the end of December. And they have been offering social emotional counseling and support for our students, and they've been doing a great job. They were available, they're doing outreach, they're meeting with families, and we're really thankful for them and for the time and effort they put in. And then we've also have our Title VI counselor, Darletta Fullwider. She has been absolutely fabulous in reaching out to families, doing different lunch bunches and groups and whatnot. And we just hired on another temporary counselor employee, Aurora Chavez, who has hit the ground running so far with home visits and getting together lunch bunches. We're at different grade levels. The kids can get together and talk with each other and talk with her. She created an interactive calming room where the kids can log on, or even there's actually been more adults that have been logging on to the calming room sometimes than the kids. But going on to there to find those resources. And then finally, the ReEngagement team. So our ReEngagement group meets every week on Mondays, and we have the teachers fill out a survey on Friday evening that is the student non-engagement or student engagement non-participation form, and we generate a list. And we go through that list from the teachers as we go through, and the list isn't generated just by kids that aren't attending school, but it also is a list of students that are attending but maybe aren't completing work, that are attending that aren't turning on their camera, and stuff like that. So the teachers put in the comment, we review the list of students as we go through, and then we organize who is going to be reaching out to which specific student. And then there's also our home visits. That's the basis for our home visits as we go through. I would probably say that we're probably averaging, I would say probably around 20 home visits a week right now. And while not all the home visits are really productive, there have been some really high spots so far. In some cases, it's taken several weeks of some repeated outreach and engagement. But seeing the kids begin to get on and having the families build a little bit more trust with the school has been a real positive as we go through. And I think, probably seeing more positives than I am negatives in that. And it's been a really good opportunity to get to know the families and for the families to get to know us. So that's been really good for that social emotional part here at school. And then moving on to academics here at Oak Manor. It's really exciting right now. Our grade 4-5 team. There's a few new members to the team this year. And last year, we started having conversations almost a year ago about the idea of specialization in the upper grades here at Oak Manor Elementary School. An idea of specialization in English language arts and math. Obviously, math was a major focus area for the district for this year, and some of the work that we did with Steve Zoibeck in our plan. And we wanted to continue the momentum with that work. And also there was some support at the district level about engaging teachers in trying this specialization out. Our teachers did. And I set up and I interviewed the entire 4 or 5 grade level. And it was a really good interview because it was interesting to see how the first conversations we had in January and February and a little bit in March, how it changed so much to the conversation, the interview that we had just last week. They really congealed together as a team. They're talking fluidly about kids. They all know each other's kids as we go through, and it's been a really, it's been a super thing so far. But when I talked to them, some of the main points that they had was that it makes collaboration for the adults easier and more effective. When they're able to focus on a particular academic area, they can really talk about it and go a little deeper. We have a few of our teachers that are working with district TOSAs to improve math instruction as we go through. They also had mentioned how it's really building their content knowledge. They're able to learn a little bit more deeply about their ELA or math as they dig into it. And it also has been sending out areas where they're learning more about each other as professionals. So if somebody has a background, in birds, right? So they did, then they developed a bird unit, and everybody was going to a couple different teachers to discuss birds and take logs and stuff like that. They really talked a lot about improving the school climate because they're all sharing students. It isn't just one student or one student group that is with one teacher for the whole day, but the kids are moving and they're having different groups and they're able to participate with each other, which has been a real positive thing for the students as well as for the adults. They like the student to teacher ratio because if some classes you have 30 kids or 31 or 32, you don't have that necessarily that same number all the time. And when they do some of the specialization, there will also be pull-out times that are available where we have some small group instruction, either math or English language arts through our RTI team. So they're able to really focus and drill down on the skills that each one of the kids needs. There's a lot of talk because we have a 4-5 combo, how it is easier to manage the 4-5 combo with a specialization with ELA and math, able to drill down and really give the kids what they need as they move through. Like I said before, a math focus. They really, one of the teachers said, they're so happy because they've become a better math teacher so far this school year. And it's evident in the way that she's teaching and also with the results that she's getting as she's assessing kids. One point that they brought through, especially for older kids sometimes, is they feel like they're stuck with a particular teacher. And it ends up sometimes they get on each other's nerves at times. But because the kids move around, there seems to be less student and teacher fatigue. When a kid may get frustrated with a student in one particular area that they're having a hard time with, they're able to transition to another teacher, and then it's kind of like a restart. And then they're able to come back, and then they go through, and they're able to keep rolling throughout the school day. And seeing different kids at different times has really helped move the day along. And a lot of them had mentioned how that actually has helped a great deal with managing distance learning and how they're working it all out. They're able to differentiate more in class. So because they're really focused on their content area for ELA or math, they're able to differentiate a little bit better and drill down and really teach those particular areas where the kids are, and they're able to space things out a little bit more, which is really good. And the kids, they move fluidly between different groups based on their needs. So they're assessing the kids on a regular cycle. And when the kids are doing, need something more, they're doing better, then they move into another group to be challenged with it. Or if they need a little bit more support, they just kind of do it. And it's getting to the point where they're just beginning. They've been doing the switches, but where it's become part of just what they do. So the kids are getting used to transitioning to different groups as they move through. And then it also really, it promotes consistency across the grade levels. Nobody's teaching in isolation. They all have to be in each other's business because they're all sharing students. They all need to be in around the same place with the benches and the benchmark so that the kids are getting the same kind of thing. And it's really kind of good because it's more consistent across that 4 or 5 grade level, and they're able to have some deeper conversations about student learning. And that, I think, concludes it for me.
Great, thank you, Mr. Francis. Are there any questions for Mr. Francis? or
No,
comments?
not a question, but I think it's exciting to hear how they're doing there at the upper grades. I'll be curious, once we go back to normal school, how they like that as well.
Yeah.
Trustee Arkin?
So to be clear, so all fourth and fifth grades are like this?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, our fourth and
Ah.
fifth grade, so there's a 4-5 combo, 2 fifth grades and 2 fourth grades. They've been meeting since the end of last year and during the summer to plan out how they're going to schedule, who's going to be at what specialization area, but only for ELA and math. And the main focus has been the math instruction to support some of the plans that we put forward as a district last year.
Are you trying to change the whole philosophy of 2 grades in 1 class and make it more of a positive thing? I mean, it sounds like it really is.
Well, I'm not. The teachers are doing it, and they're the ones that are changing the culture. And I think the mindset too, a little bit. My job is just to give them resources to do it.
Yeah, yeah. That's really interesting.
It's exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
Deb, Superintendent Cuban? You're muted.
I thought I unmuted myself, but thank you, Chris, for taking that on and piloting it. I know it was a focus in our district, and with COVID, it was hard to keep that. So I just really appreciate you and your teachers stepping up to try that out. So just huge thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Principal Francis. All right, so we're going to move on to item D1, which is the 2021 budget overview for parents. Is this you, Superintendent Cuban, or Chief Business Official Barrickman? Barrickman, okay. Mr. Barrickman.
Great, all right, good evening. Hopefully you can see the screen okay. So 2020-21 would have been the second or third year that this budget overview for parents would have been paired with the LCAP. But as you know, or as you may recall, the LCAP was put on hold for 2020-21 due to the pandemic. And so we didn't have to bring this forward in June with the LCAP. We did have to instead bring out a local or learning continuity and attendance plan we brought to you and you approved in September. And part of that package was that we had to still do this budget overview by December. And so that's why we're here tonight with this. This is kind of an interesting document. I think if Katie and Christy and I sat down and decided to draft something up that would explain our budget in 3 or 4 pages, I don't know that it would look like this, but I don't necessarily have a better idea either. And this is what we have to do. So here we are. So basically what this document tries to do is just kind of give parents an overview of what does our general fund look like? How much of it has to be spent on our unduplicated pupil count? And then what other funds do we spend to help pay for the education program? I'm happy to walk you through it. It's not that exciting necessarily. You can see on the first page, it shows you a nice little pie chart of what our revenues look like. And obviously the local control funding formula is the large majority of our revenues. And then it kind of breaks down from there, how that breaks down into money set aside for transportation, money set aside for the unduplicated pupil count, or money that's not really restricted and that we use to kind of pay for pretty much everything. You know, the general fund pays for pretty much everything in the district, from teacher salaries and benefits to classified salaries and benefits. And that is, 75 to 80% of our budget most years. And the balance really goes to the overhead, keeping the lights on and the fields mowed and things like that. So all this is really trying to do is say how much of our general fund is going to the unduplicated pupil count, and theoretically, how are we spending it? But again, I'm not sure it's the best tool to call that out, but it's the tool we have. So.
And Steve, I'll just add, this is a state required template. That's why Steve is mentioning it's not his favorite tool, but it is the one that we're required to use. So.
Great, thank you.
A compliance document.
One of my favorites, yes. Are there any questions, or like me to keep walking through the document? What would please the board?
I would say we were able to look at it and don't need to be walked through it unless somebody else disagrees. Where'd Megan?
I'm in agreement.
Oh,
I
Sorry.
agree.
I can stop sharing that then. Okay, this is an action item. I believe we need approval of this.
okay.
Um,
I think while Megan is screen's dark, I will take over for, oh, is she back?
Sorry, yes. But carry on, Trustee Fernandez, for a second.
I was going to ask if there is a motion to approve the budget overview for parents.
I so
I'll
moved.
make, okay. I'll second, but I have one friendly amendment, if you don't mind. There's a couple times in here in which we say high needs students, and it's kind of like special needs students. What we've learned from our special education educators is that we are to say students with special needs or students with higher needs, so that the emphasis is on the student, not on their different need. So I'm wondering if it's possible to change the term high needs students to students with higher needs.
And that is a great question. And again, this is a template with very little control for us. The typos that are in here and the things like that are things we cannot control. They're part of the template. And we're stuck with
Okay, then my second stands without the requested amendment, but I would ask you to give that feedback to whoever made the template in Sacramento.
it.
So is there,
There was a second.
okay. Why don't you finish this motion? Trustee
Okay, all in
Fernandez?
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, back to you. Let me know if you're gonna go black.
Okay, yeah, I know.
Couldn't
I
see
do.
that.
I apologize. I do want to give a public shout out to my husband and daughter who just delivered me dinner. And so I was running down to pick up my dinner. So thank you to my husband and daughter. And I'll take over now. So we're moving on to item D2, the update on the learning loss mitigation and elementary secondary school emergency relief fund budgets. This is still Steve, I believe.
Yes, it is. Thank you. So again, this is one of our monthly recurring items, talking about our COVID budgets. You know, back in the summer, or the spring, we found out that we had all this money to help us with the pandemic. And at first, it seemed like an awful lot of money and a very short deadline for us to get that money spent. As you'll recall, of the $7 million-ish that we had to spend, 5.5 million had to be spent by December 30th. And that seemed like a very difficult task at first, but I'm happy to say we managed to get through that. We have spent all of those funds. So we're in pretty good shape there. So tonight, we're just going to give you a brief recap of how those funds were spent, and then we're going to come back to you and talk about the rest of those COVID funds. A lot of those we hadn't really figured out how we were going to spend just yet. Well, now we kind of have a pretty good plan, at least at a high level, of how we want to spend that. So we'll talk about that. We're also going to use some of the supplemental and concentration grant carryover funds to supplement some of those monies. And the interesting thing is that this may be a 1-month report, and this report may change pretty dramatically next month or the month after. When I wrote this presentation back in the middle of last week, I was pretty optimistic we were going to see some more money from the federal government late last week or this week. That degree of optimism has kind of wavered over the days as the negotiations have ebbed and flowed, as they tend to do. So I'm not as confident now we will get some more money between now and the end of 2020 calendar year. But I am pretty comfortable that if we don't get some more money now, we'll probably get some more money after January 20th. So again, these are budgets, they're a point in time. They're not etched in stone until we actually spend the money and the year is closed. Looking at the different revenues we have for all the different COVID programs. Again, the highlighted one here in red was the Federal CARES Act Coronavirus Relief Fund. That was the big pressure we had on us to get this $5.5 million spent by December 30th. And again, we've made it. It's interesting, they've kind of changed the definition of what spent means from how it typically has been defined in schools, but we've satisfied those requirements and have that money spent. So we're not at risk of having any of that taken back. The rest of the pots of money, you can see how much they are in the different spending deadlines. A couple of the pots go into 22 and one is actually not dated at all. I think we're going to spend the majority of this by June 30th, with some money carried over to the following year to help pay for some of these licenses and things we'll have to maintain, even if we're back to site-based learning. Some of those commitments we made were 2-year commitments for things. Okay, so the learning loss mitigation funds, the coronavirus relief funds that we had to have spent by December. Here you can see how it ended up shaking out. The bulk of the money went to technology and to curriculum and instruction, trying to get our technology updated, get new Chromebooks in our students' hands, get hotspots to our students, get headsets, get microphones, get whatever else kind of technology-wise we needed. And then also to support the in-person activities we're doing after school. That's been a really important part of how we knew we needed to help support our students, and our budgets and how we spent the money really reflects that. Again, we've also done some things with furniture. As we've talked before, we had done a good job of putting collaborative furniture in place over the last several years. And the pandemic has made us realize that some of that collaborative furniture needs to be not so collaborative in the short term as we come back. So we've gotten some furniture for both inside the classrooms and for outside that will definitely help us keep kids and staff spaced apart and keep everybody safe and healthy. So from there, we sat down and kind of went through all the rest of the funds that were TBD in those other funds that have longer spending deadlines, which was about 1.7 million. And we said, okay, what do we think we're going to do with that? And so tonight, this kind of gives you a recap of where we think we're going to spend that money. Again, you see the large majority of it is going to go to after school in-person activities, and we think that's really important. Again, get as many kids as we can on a school campus, get them with their peers, get them with other adults. And again, the budget reflects that. We think we'll need a little bit of the SCG carryover possibly to help fund some of this. We've identified some of the extracurricular activities for secondary and also some of the Chromebook purchases to help offset the 6,000 Chromebooks that we have ended up buying. The second piece here talks about the continued needs previously funded from coronavirus relief. A lot of that is the site allocations that had not been spent by December 30th. Once we kind of realized we were going to have enough money spent by December 30th and we didn't need to keep pushing the sites to spend, we kind of said, okay, let's take a breath. If you don't need something now and you want to wait until we have a clearer picture of how we're going to come back, that's okay. We wanted to make sure we kept them whole financially. So we're setting aside money out of the remaining pots to make sure they're not getting penalized for not having spent their money earlier. Some more technology related items. Again, a lot of the hotspots, we may not, once we return to site-based learning, we hopefully shouldn't need as many hotspots, but a lot of them did have 2-year contracts. That was the only way we could get them. So we'll be paying for some of these hotspots for quite a while. So trying to make sure that we have money set aside for that. So it's not coming out of our general fund. And then the last category, the other items, we know we'll need some more planning time as we get close to bringing kids back. We may need some additional PPE. Of the items on this list, the one that might be questionable could be that one, because we don't know what we're going to need when we come back. So it's possible we have all the PPE we need already. It's possible we don't have nearly enough. We really don't know. So we have some money set aside for that as we go forward. Any questions on this page before I go forward?
Yeah, Steve, I did have a question. And then did somebody else have their hand raised? Remind me, the SCG carryovers from last year.
Correct.
And are we required to use it this year? I can't, remind me of those rules.
No, there doesn't seem to be any real clear deadline when we have to get those funds spent. And so again, it's possible we won't spend all that. The last slide in this presentation talks about how we're going to spend those funds.
Okay, I
Again,
can wait till then.
There's a couple placeholders in there of things that we may or may not get to this year. It's hard to know. Plus, I would expect that we'll have some carryover from this year's SCG funds into next year as well, depending on when we come back and what we do when we get actually back to school. So.
Okay, any questions at this point from the board? Okay, seeing none, carry on, Steve.
Okay, thank you. So again, these next few slides just kind of break down each pot of money, how we're going to spend them, how much has been spent or encumbered so far, and how much is still remaining. You can see of the state Proposition 98 bucket of learning loss mitigation funds, a little over $500,000. We've spent about half of it, and we still have half to go. The next batch is the GEAR funds, or the Governor's Educational Emergency Relief Funds. Again, a smaller pot of money, $360,000. We've only got about 9% of that spent or encumbered so far. So again, that's kind of where a lot of the money set aside, or some of the money set aside for the time to prepare for kids coming back and for PPE is sitting. The next pot is the ESSER funds, I forget my acronym, sorry, but
Elementary and secondary school emergency relief.
Great, thank you. Again, this is like one of the biggest pots of money we have remaining, probably this is the biggest pot. 31% spent or encumbered, so we have a pretty good chunk of money sitting here still. Again, to kind of support instructional materials, support PPE, support the after-school in-person activities that are so important, and some technology as well. The last little pot is the first pot of money we got, interestingly enough, back in the spring, the $99,000 with no spending deadline and really no spending strings on the money. We can pretty much spend it however we see fit in response to the pandemic. So this will be the money we kind of spend last because it is the least restrictive and has the longest deadline. Then the last piece is we thought we'd bring back the supplemental and concentration grant carryover. So we carried over almost $8 million from last year into this year. Again, we didn't spend all of last year's supplemental and concentration funds because once we went into the pandemic, into distance learning in March, our spending patterns and our spending needs changed greatly. So of these funds, we'd like to use a pretty good chunk to help with the Chromebook purchases. We had purchased the first 2,000 Chromebooks using this money, actually, and we need a little bit more to help pay for the other 4,000. From there, a lot of these other items had already been budgeted or were carryovers for different programs and sites that we wanted to maintain. And the big piece here you see highlighted in green towards the bottom is the $441,000 for summer school. We're really hoping and expecting to be back this summer, and we want to run as many rich and robust summer programs as we can. And this chunk of money will go a long way towards helping us fund a lot of that. So we definitely think we want to keep that money earmarked for that. And again, I think we'll see more money from the federal government sometime in the next couple months. And so we could maybe shuffle some of these funds after that. But for now, this is kind of where we are as of tonight. And with that, I can stop sharing unless there's any questions about any specific slide.
Superintendent Cuban?
I'll just add, I was on a call today where it was stated that the state is talking about some potential one-time money for school districts to fund more robust summer session programs. So, that's a placeholder for now. Hopefully we'll get some funding if we're back in person to be able to run summer sessions.
Great. Any questions or comments from the board?
Just a comment that thank you, Steve, for making sure that you're not penalizing schools that did not spend early. And that's great that you figured that out and thought of it ahead of time before, all hell broke loose. And there's great progress to spending all the money. We kept razzing you about that. Are you sure you're going to spend this by the due date? So thank you for paying so much attention to that. My other question is, so we're buying a total of 6,000 Chromebooks, and is that just to get ahead of our idea that every 5 years we'd be buying 20% of our needs? So are we just kind of pre-buying that?
Okay, well, the first 2,000 were to refresh the high school Chromebooks, right? That were definitely due for the refresh. And their computers got bumped down to the elementary grades. Well, elementary kids aren't typically used to having Chromebooks, and they're a little harder on them than maybe our older students are. And so we thought we might have some Chromebooks to keep in reserve for a couple of years. May not survive this year at the rate we're going. And so we thought we needed to go ahead and get on top of it. Plus, with the changes in the software requirements on the Chromebooks for all the state testing, once that all gets restored, we kind of needed to get them in place anyway. So it seemed like the right tool, the right decision for the district for the short term and the long term.
But we're still maybe not next school year, but the school year after that, we would again be planning on replacing 20% of everything, so we don't get too far behind.
I think that'd be very prudent, or at least putting the money away, even if we didn't have to buy them next year or the year after, to have the money set aside would be very prudent. Yeah, it's definitely disrupting our cycle, but that's kind of a nice problem to have instead of not being able to fund for a few years and having our cycle disrupted that way.
Very true. Very true. Thank you.
So we are going to have a first interim budget report coming up. So there'll be another opportunity to talk about the general financial health of the district. So are there any more questions specifically about these funds? Seeing none, we have asked for, I feel like we've had this item like every board meeting for the past 3 or 4 times. So I guess the question is both to Superintendent Cuban and Mr. Bergman and the board, do we want this again next month, or do we feel like we got a good grasp on these special funds? I'll start with board members and then see any strong feelings one way or the other, board members? So you're all looking like you don't care that much one way or the other. Is that right? Tyler, I'm going to check in specifically with you. Okay. So then I think Superintendent Cuban and Mr. Bergman will leave it up to you if you feel like there's something significant with these funds for next month. Otherwise, I think we could take a little breather on them unless there's something. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it does. And if once we get new money, when we get new money, we can certainly come back and talk about that at that point and how that affects these budgets.
Okay. And then just to clarify, because sometimes this happens, do you believe that we are approving something right now with this item, or was this just an update? And this is a question to Mr. Bergman, I guess, and Superintendent Cuban.
You're approving the budget as much as you can approve a budget anytime it is an action item, yes, and subject to change. It gives us our marching orders for how we're going to spend these funds for the time being. Okay, so this is an action item where we are actually approving the way you have chosen to spend this money for right now. Great. Yes. Okay, to that end, is there a motion to accept this update on the Learning Loss Mitigation Fund and approve this direction for spending?
I so move.
Okay, and there's a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table from Trustee Nelson, seconded by Trustee Fernandez to accept this report and approve the budget direction of these funds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, any abstentions? Seeing none, this motion passes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Bergman. You have a comment?
If I could just add, just the one thing that was time sensitive tonight was we have some community partners who are kind of waiting to decide how they're going to roll their programs out after the first of the year, pending tonight's activity. So now they can go forward with their families, which is good news. So thank
Great.
you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item D3, distance learning update. Is this you, Superintendent Cuban, or you? Okay.
It's team assistant superintendent and team superintendent together. So we will be tackling this report together. And this is our monthly distance learning report. We didn't anticipate doing so many of these month after month, but here we are again with some good news and some, challenging areas. But just to jump in here, Katie, this is our 16th week of this school year in distance learning, and schools have been closed to in-person learning for 8 months. And that's pretty amazing when you think about it. I was talking to my own kids over the weekend about, they have acquaintances, friends they haven't seen in close to a year. And it's pretty crazy when you think about that, especially as much as our kids grow over a year. I'm really proud to say, Katie, if you can slide forward on that, really proud to say our administrators and our re-engagement teams have been very hard at work. To date, they've done 1,309 phone calls, home visits, in-person home visits, check-ins to receive feedback from parents and to support families. We've also visited 1,334 classrooms, which is amazing. So I just want to give a huge shout out to our teams that are checking in with families, both in person, checking in, and also phone calling and visiting classrooms. So,
Trustee Nelson, did you have a comment there?
Yeah, what kind of feedback are you getting when you check in with parents on the phone calls? What's the range like on that?
It's quite diverse. I think as more time goes by, you know, we certainly get positive comments, but you know, people are tired. Kids are tired, parents are tired, staff is tired. It's time for a little break. We're looking forward to rolling into a break on Saturday. You know, everybody's working really hard. And so it's diverse, Tyler. It really is diverse in terms of people's experience. And again, as more time goes by, I know from my end, I'm getting more frustrated calls, higher level of frustration of parents, not because our teachers aren't working hard and teaching well in the classroom. Parents are just tired. And so their patience is less, but our staff is working really hard to do whatever we can to give kids whatever we can. And I'm really excited in this report to share what we've been doing with in-person, after school in person with our partners, because I think that's giving families and kids a little bit of hope. So very diverse response. But I think people are very weary of being home. So, and with that, we're going to jump into attendance. I know there's a ton of data here. So the good news is our student attendance overall has been very positive. And Katie's broken everything down by grade level and school site. Our attendance percentage usually runs at about 93%, and we're running at close to 96 or a little over 96% during this time, which is really great. It means that our kids are coming to class and or completing their work. And so that's all very positive news. And again, we've broken it out here by grade level and school site. So we also have it broken out by subgroup for you to look at as well. And the other thing that Katie, can you go back one? You can see here that we've got things broken out by live interaction means did they attend class on the virtual, on the Google Meet or the Zoom. And then they also can be present by other means, meaning they've completed their work, the equivalent work. So, and that is a little bit varied, but you can see like the high school, at the high school, 94% attendance percentage for live interaction. That's really good. That's really good for us. So anyway, that is positive news. And then Katie broke things out for you also by subgroup. So if we can roll into those.
And Deb, I just wanted to quickly comment, these don't exactly add up. There is a small percentage because of UESA and a few independent study students. So just so you know, if you see any that don't exactly add up, that's the difference. We just didn't think that was as important to look at as the two percentages.
And I was told by a community member that we speak in too many acronyms. So UESA is Ukiah Independent Study Academy. So I'm going to try and really challenge myself to spell some of those out. Okay, so going forward, you can look at our attendance rates by race and ethnicity. And we definitely, oh, Katie, you moved forward to language proficiency. So we definitely see a gap there for our Native American students. And we're doing a lot of outreach there with our Native American families to see what more we can do to get kids engaged. Although at Pomalita, you can see, and Frank Zeke, 96%, 99%, which is really awesome. So anyway, when we look at this data, we really do look for gaps and to see what more we can do for students. And then we've got it broken out also by language proficiency. So we're looking at how our English learners are doing compared to our other subgroups. And this is actually looking pretty good across the district in terms of our language proficiency. Go ahead, Katie. Economic status, socioeconomic status. You can see that as a district, it's pretty close. There aren't very significant gaps there. So that's really good to see as well. Go ahead, Katie. Special education status, looking pretty good as well. A couple of little areas that we can work on, but it's looking really great. Grace Hudson, Calpella, Frank Zeke. I know our numbers at our elementary schools are pretty low, but you can see that in terms of the number of students, but as the Pomalita is running at 97%, which is awesome, which is right there where the school is. So good news there. And Katie, go ahead. Foster youth, you can see overall district 96%. For foster kids, 96.33, and then 96.11 as a district. So that's really good. Homeless, our homeless students are, we're working really hard on that because you can see that there's a significant gap there in terms of our attendance for homeless students. So we're trying to do a lot of outreach in that area with home visits and or outreach to where students are. But you can see those gaps and that's concerning. And then we also—
Superintendent Cuba?
Yes.
There's, more than a 10% difference with Eagle Peak and Oak Manor. Do you think that's a reporting problem? Did we lose a family liaison or something there? Or do you think that that's just what it is?
Katie, do you know the actual number of kids at those school sites?
I don't have the number, but typically that's a smaller number of students. So a few affect the percentage. And I could get those numbers.
But it is concerning, Trustee Mulgard, for sure. That is a very significant gap.
Okay, I guess what I would say is if it turns out to be bigger numbers than you thought, then just let us know maybe in a TGIF what the specific strategies are that you might try for those two schools.
We will, and it could be one or two families, so we just need to look at that for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Those are great questions. Okay, go ahead, Katie. We also looked at secondary schools, so our middle schools and our high schools by period. So as you can see, in some of our schools, the afternoon kids sort of drop off a bit. Ukiah High School, for example, fourth period, first period, the attendance percentage is 87%. And then by fourth period, it's 79%. So kind of tells us a few things about what's going on there. But there aren't huge disparities, but there's a little bit. And at the high school, it's almost 10% there, a difference between first and fourth period. And just remember, everybody, we are on a block schedule. That's why Ukiah High School only has 4 periods. Go ahead, Katie.
And I was just going to say Pomalita has, 90% or higher, except for the very last period, which is really good. And this attendance is taken slightly differently than the all-day code.
Right, by periods. So we talked about most of this. And again, attendance is a good news story. So our kids are attending and they're completing work, and that is really great news. And so we talked about the subgroups we're concerned about, and our staff. One of the reasons why I think it's so great is because our teams are doing an excellent job trying to re-engage students who are not attending. So they are regularly reviewing data on students. They're making phone calls home. They're doing home visits. They're meeting with parents and students. The counselors are following up. They're doing health checks of families, maybe who've been quarantined. We've got our Title VI counselors. And for second semester, as you all know, we are, and we'll talk about this in more detail later in this presentation, but we're having to relook at our secondary schools' hybrid schedules. And we're looking at this as as how do we, build in more supports in the afternoon for our students, especially at the high school. So we're looking at schedule changes related to that, as well as the necessity to make schedule changes because of the health guidance. So our teams are working hard to really engage students. We've also done another Hanover District Pulse Survey, and this is hot off the press. I think that it needed to be completed by last Thursday. So we just completed this survey again. This is the second one that we've done. This survey does not go into as much depth as the previous survey, but it has the overall big picture results. We did have fewer participants this time around in terms of the stakeholder groups. So in September, we had 1,100 parents. This time we had 700. We had about the same number of staff, but we did also have fewer students. So it's a lower number, a reduced number of students, but we're grabbing really good data. And Katie, and by the way, Katie, thank you so much for all of your work on putting this together. We know it's a ton of work, but it's really important. It helps guide our work going forward. Katie put the comparison data together, and in general, I'm going to say it's close to the same as the last time, except for two pieces. For staff, in September, they said that we needed to make sure and really focus on access to tools and technology, and we did that. And now they do not feel like it's as big of a focus. However, building safety measures went from 9% thought that it should be a focus, and this went up to 18%. And then for our students, I'm really excited. I'm going to Zoom with some students tomorrow because I really want to dive into this communication piece. Which of the following should Ukiah Unified focus on for improvement? And our students, it's on the top there for them, thinking, and it hasn't changed since September. So I want to have some conversation with our students about that question and what they think of when they think of that question. What areas of communication for our students? In which areas can we improve? So I'm starting out tomorrow on a learning mission, and I can't wait to talk with our students.
Superintendent Cuban, I think that'll be really interesting. I've been puzzled by that last time too. What does that mean? So it'll be interesting to hear what they think.
I know. Yeah, so that'll be really fun tomorrow. And then the social emotional needs focus has increased. So as you all know, because you get our communications, we have been really hitting that hard, especially right now, in terms of how to access social emotional supports. And I just want to thank the board for being brilliant about putting funding into after school in-person activities, because that supports a student's social emotional health as well. So thank you for suggesting that and giving us the permission to go for it related to that. So a lot of this is pretty similar to our last assessment. I'm just pointing out the areas that were a little bit different. So Katie, go ahead and move forward.
Just one question on that from the teacher's perspective about now they are more concerned about building safety measures. And I wonder if that's just because with the vaccine coming, we're closer to going back in, or have they actually noticed things that we could do better? And I don't know how to drill down to get that information, but it is curious.
Yeah, we can bring that up in our UTA problem solving meeting, in our next meeting. That's a good question, just digging deeper into it.
Along those same lines, Deb, and I can't remember what the official name of it is, but the UTA teachers, CSEA administration got together and put together our safety plan. Is that document accessible to all teachers? That change in the number, I'm like, what changed? But I'm just wondering, have they seen it? Is it readily accessible?
Yes, so it's the collaborative committee that you're talking about, and we have been meeting, and we are, in our most recent meeting, we were taking the public health officer's schools guidance that came out the night of our last board meeting and incorporating any differences in the school's guidance into that reopening document. So the we haven't put it back out again. We also, our communications officer took all of that narrative and put it into a guide for parents. And so we also created a new website for all things COVID that we communicated last week to our parents. But we're close to getting that revised document out again. We just wanted to make sure we captured what the public health officer said in the school's guidance document. So we met last Friday, actually, just 3 days ago. But we do continue to meet and collaboratively, teachers, our CSEA president, and administrators. So Katie, go ahead and scroll forward. And again, these are our overall perceptions in terms of satisfaction. So how satisfied are you with the following? And the good news is, from a parent's perception, they're more satisfied with online instruction from September to December. It's gone from 60 to 66%. And we're pretty flat everywhere else. And staff's perception, school supports for instructional staff, so professional development, that's gone down a bit. We need to look at that and see what more our teachers might need right now in terms of professional development. Everything else has stayed pretty static. And then for our students, school supports for students' academic needs, that has gone down 8%. So that's really worth looking at. And I'll just say that we have a lot of supports available, but when you've been online all day, I imagine as a student, the last thing that you want to do is go online again after school and get some additional support. I'm not going to say that's true for all students, but that could be a piece of it. And then for students, interestingly, parents felt that online instruction, they're more satisfied with it, but students, it's gone down by 5%. So that is interesting. And then they feel like, although we've increased student support for social emotional needs, that's gone down also. So I'll probably ask some students some questions about that tomorrow too, not just communication, but I'm curious about what more we can do, what they feel that their needs are. So that is that. And we did summarize everything that I just talked about at the end there as well. So we can keep moving forward there unless anybody has any questions. But we have not, because this just finished on Thursday, we didn't have time to disaggregate the data. So we are going to do that for the board. We'll put it in a Friday communication, and we'll also give that to staff. We do want to follow up with staff on professional development needs, and we will be sharing this data with the school sites as well. And then I will be having the fun of talking with some students tomorrow. And I will probably do some more follow-up with some different subgroups as well to make sure I'm getting a variety of opinions. We also looked at, we just had our secondary student progress reports, and our high school, they don't give grades at the progress report, but they do have to mark whether or not a student is failing or in danger of failing. So we wanted to look at that because we know that at the quarter, we were concerned about the number of students failing classes at the quarter. And so we grabbed that data to look at, and we compared it to where we were last year at this time. And it's super interesting. At Ukiah High School last year at this time, it was slightly higher than it is now, 3%, so 49.9%, 97% of students last year at Ukiah High during this time had the mark on their progress report failing or in danger of failing one or more classes. And right now it's 46.24%. Super concerning last year, super concerning this year. And I know that that's one area that our equity committee, last year when we were doing our strategic planning process, that was one area that has come up, was about grading practices. So I imagine they'll be dipping into that topic a little bit. Eagle Peak is about the same as last year at this time, and Pomalita has increased slightly. So we will be sharing this data with the staff. The principals just saw this report today. So anyway, it is very concerning. And then you can also see, we've broken it out by subgroup. So on the next slide, you can see students who are economically disadvantaged versus not. There's some slight differences, a little bit of increase there, but not too significant, not 10, 20%. But the numbers are concerning, obviously, having 50% in danger of failing or failing one or more classes is definitely concerning. And then gender, we've broken it out by gender for you. And there are some differences there. Our female students at Ukiah High are doing a little bit better than last year. And also at Pomalita, you can see that fewer students had that code marked on their progress report. And then going forward, we've got it broken out also by ethnicity, race, ethnicity. And you can see the differences there.
Deb, I wanted to point out at Pomalita, the Native American subgroup over the 2 years has declined. And they've been really doing a lot of work connecting to Native American families through their re-engagement process. And you can see that data there because it's declined this year.
Yep, which is great. And then we've got the data for you on, I know we have so much data for you tonight, but we've got the data for you on language fluency. Very concerning is when you look at English learners, both at Ukiah High School and at Eagle Peak. The number of students who are in danger of failing one or more classes is very high, and it has increased.
Superintendent Cuban, I forgot what IFEP stands for.
Initially Fluent English Proficient. Thank you for asking that question. So when they came into the district, Katie, you want to describe this?
Sure.
Coded?
When they came to the district, the parents fill out a language survey. And so that when they filled it out, they were then required to be assessed on the LPAC. And then at that point, when they first came, they were deemed to be proficient in English. And so they were not considered English learners. And we use the IFEP.
Okay, thanks.
Moving forward to our special education students, it's pretty close to the same as last year in terms of, although at Ukiah High, it's increased slightly. And then our homeless students, just moving forward a little bit here, are good news. If you look at Eagle Peak, I'm just pointing out some good news here. Compared to last year, homeless students looking a lot better. We know those numbers are pretty small, and that can swing pretty rapidly, but that's really good news. So those are, that's what we're looking at right now related to grading, and the semester ends at the second week of after we get back from the break. And so we're hoping to see a low failure rate among our students. So we know they're working really hard. We know our staff is working really hard, and I know our our teachers are really on this. Megan? Oh, I thought you were going to talk. Got it.
Was that the last slide? I wasn't sure.
No.
Okay.
I'll keep going on. Really exciting have been our Ukiah Unified in-person activities. So you can see that we've had some on-site learning pods. So we've had these are pretty small, but in person at Eagle Peak, 6 students, Nokomis at 12. Pomalita has been partnering with their feeder elementary schools so that families can be served. So although one of the pods occurred at Nokomis, it had Nokomis and Pomalita students. And at Oak Manor, there were 14 students. Ukiah High School had 16 students, 3 students in chemistry, 5 in fashion, 9 in band. And then we had 2 pods available and staffed for 30 Ukiah High students, but they've not attended yet. So we will get back to that after the break. And then in-person activities, Eagle Peak has served 10 students. We've served 210 students through our partnership with the city of Ukiah through their safari programs at Frank Zeke, Pomalita, and Ukiah. At Pomalita, they've run volleyball, science Olympiad, a MESA program, and newcomer program for English learners who are brand new to the school and speak very little English. So we've served about 62 students. We've also served over 2 months, 160 students at Space. We've paid for the students' programs to do after-school in-person activities. And Ukiah High School has run a variety of athletic conditioning. There was a math club that was meeting. We've got mock trial. They've been meeting online, but these in-person activities, we've served 270 students. So this is really exciting to be able to offer these programs for kids. And we will definitely be continuing this into January. Really kind of a highlight. And as Principal Oslin describes, often he works outside and in the quad. And he said that some of his favorite moments are when students are coming to their after school in-person activities, just to be able to see their smiling faces. Actually, one of the city programs that was being run at Pomalita, that was actually for elementary students. And so our Pomalita principal, Brian Barrett, volunteered to have that running at Pomalita, and it's all been very successful. So we're excited about that, excited to be able to continue it. Certainly a challenge is the number of times that we've had to revise plans. And I want to thank the board, our staff, and our students, and especially our parents for being flexible. I know this has not been easy. So as I said when we were meeting on November 12th, the Mendocino County Public Health put out new guidance for schools. And just as we go back to think about, we created a reopening plan that we worked on from May until July. We shared that with the board in July. We shared it with our public health department in July. We, of course, learned a lot between July and October. We revised our plans. We submitted our plans to public health for our reopening plans. And we've had to revise them again. So we are the beautiful picture of flexibility. And I just want to thank everybody for their patience. So we've included the school's guidance along with this agenda item. We are working on revising our reopening plan based on the public health guidance for schools. We've been, our scheduling committee has been meeting again. The guidance that came out, it doesn't support the hybrid model that we put together way back in July, because the guidance talks about students and teacher can only have 50 interactions, interactions with 50 others for academic purposes. And so because of our class sizes, it made us go back to the drawing board with our secondary schedules. So we are looking at, we've got really creative people at work, our administrators, our teachers. We've looked all over the state for different learning plans, different schedules that are being used by secondary schools. And so we are basically, with this guidance, we can't see our secondary students coming on campus for more than one period because of the restrictions on the guidance. So we're trying to get our kids everything that we possibly can. Somebody suggested that we shift the secondary schedule to the afternoon. And so we're looking at that possibility for the high school, with potentially having distance learning in the morning, having kids have lunch, and doing enrichment and support in the afternoon, followed up by after school extracurricular activities. So we are soon needing to settle on something. We've also put out the health and safety guidebook for families, and we've got our COVID response website. And Trustee Nelson.
I'm sorry for jumping out of my seat. Have you talked to any other counties and how they're dealing with this 50 contacts per person in the schools?
I think that is specific to Mendocino County.
So there's no other county that you've heard about that has this 50 number that is causing troubles?
I haven't. I have my statewide superintendent's meeting on Thursday. I'm going to ask there to see if anybody else has this, but I haven't found a county yet that has had that I have seen.
And I'm so sorry for interrupting. This Zoom thing is totally fun.
Okay.
Was that 50 number, was it backed by science, or where did that come from? Why is our county I haven't heard about it from my personal business. I mean, we have customers that come through all the time. I go to Safeway, those people certainly have more than 50 contacts. I'm wondering, is it some school specific thing, or what's the story with that? Have you heard?
I have not. I know that there's the desire of the public health officer is to keep our staff as safe as possible. And I'm speaking for him right now, so if I get this wrong, anybody can correct me, of course. But I think the concern is that, if we increase the number of contacts, that there's a concern about for our staff. If the number were 68, for example, and truly it's a math problem. So our class sizes at the high school are 34 students. If you cut that in half, that's 17. And even if we were able to bring kids on 2 periods a day on an AB schedule, 68 would work. 50 is definitely a challenge. So we are having to go back. And again, we don't know how this is going to change yet with any vaccinations and all of that, but we are planning for that. We have talked to our legal counsel because it is guidance, but our legal counsel has advised us to make sure and implement the guidance.
So we're the only business in Mendocino County that has to follow this 50 contact rule, at least that I've heard about.
Yeah, I don't know about the other businesses, but I do know for education, that is what we are planning for. That is in the school's guidance for our secondary schools. And so our hybrid AB schedule that we presented to parents and the board in July all the way through October, we're no longer able to do that under this guidance. So we are working on something different.
Trustee Fernandez.
If you're done,
and then I see you, B.
If you're done with this presentation, can we go back to regular screen just because it's easier to see people?
Katie, can you stop sharing there?
So I know that with this pandemic, things are always changing and we're always learning things about yesterday, after they've passed. But I guess I'm a little confused why our local public health officer would have tighter restrictions than other counties, since I'm wondering does he understand the implications of that wording that he put in there, that really what it's doing is it's not going to allow our students to go back to school in a hybrid fashion when any other county would be able to because they don't have that in there. Does he, I know you can't speak for him, but I'm just wondering if it's intentional that he's trying to keep high school secondary students from going back to school, or if he doesn't realize that that's the consequence of how he worded that, because those are two, very different situations.
I don't know that I can speak for him, but I do know that we have, as superintendents, we have spoken about it for sure in our meetings.
I guess since it's just a local decision. It's hard to understand why a local decision would be such when, other counties don't have those same restrictions, and we try and follow. I thought we always try to sort of follow the state's guidelines. I'm just a little puzzled as to why we have this one, and it has huge consequences for our students. And
I did ask Trustee Fernandez at our superintendent's meeting on Friday if there are parents who are concerned about this, what should they do? And they directed me to direct parents to the schools liaison if parents have concerns about anything related to the school's guidance.
Trustee Arkin, and then I think there's probably other people who want to speak to this issue too.
Yes, I'm having a hard time understanding the logic of this. It seems to me that somehow our health officer is not getting a full picture of our schools and the numbers with how it is done, and that somehow I would hope that through MCOE or all of you or supervisors get together with him and explain to him logically how it doesn't work, logically how he's coming, but he's demanding of us. And especially if we are one of the few districts, if only district, who would be asked to do 50. It doesn't make sense in a school setting, and I would hope he would be sensitive to how the schools are run. It seems to me he's not understanding, and not maybe through his fault. He has many different jobs and things to do, and he's new, but maybe he needs to be informed of how that doesn't work and help to make it work properly, instead of us just working, all of you superintendents working your booties off to try and figure out how to make it work for him, as opposed to our students and our parents.
I concur with you, Trustee Arkin, on that. Is there any other comments or about this particular issue from any board members?
Well, I concur, and perhaps we can get a report back after the meeting with superintendents and the public health officer. And also, I hope we're not spending too much time planning with this particular 50 number, because I think it's going to change.
I do too.
50 doesn't make any sense when we look at other districts and what's happening and the new research we're getting from Europe and from other states who have stayed open, and it's not going to make any sense after the vaccine's available. So I just hope we're not spending too much time on that.
I mean, frankly, our amazing staff is trying to create a schedule that will work in multiple environments. So if we're in January, when we go to the new term, because we will be changing, kids will be, especially high school kids, they will have a whole new slate of classes in January, mid-January, because they'll get 4 new classes. We're trying to create a schedule that will work under the purple tier, the red tier, and the full tier. So
yeah, that's
with trying to give our kids everything that we possibly can. And that's kind of why they're thinking about an afternoon schedule, And I did communicate to our parents. We were trying really hard to align our elementary and secondary schedules because that's easier for families. But I just, with this guidance, it's just, we're trying to make too many things happen, and it's really not realistic. So my advice is that we got to continue to be flexible, and we may be facing 3 different phases of schedules as we roll into this semester.
Trustee Nelson?
Yeah, I guess my last comment, at least for the next 30 seconds, this just makes, if the rest of California is being advised to do it differently than Mendocino County, something's a little goofy. I don't understand what's going on. And I know that our kids are crashing, both educationally and mentally. And part of the public health of the community is making sure that our kids are healthy and are being educated. And I think that needs to be recognized by our public health officer. And he and the rest of his crew need to hear loud and clear that our county's hurting.
I think that's a really good point, Trustee Nelson. And I think I have 2 thoughts here. One, I think, having been in a couple different conversations where somebody's advocating for something with public health, whatever, and the feedback is, well, these are recommendations, these are guidelines, we only give out guidelines and recommendations. I think it's really important for our stakeholders, including public health, to understand that when they put out guidance, we have to follow it for a bunch of different reasons that may not see, they're not saying you have to do this, but we know, practically speaking, for legal issues, for union negotiation issues, for public perception issues, for us to go against the public health orders is extremely problematic and basically impossible for us. So I think that message needs to be really clear, that even if they're saying these are recommendations, these are guidelines, for us, they're barriers. It's not just a recommendation, it's actually a barrier. And I think that just emphasizing that in practicality, that's what it is. It's a barrier, not a guideline. So I'm just sometimes not sure people realize that, because it's a weird nuance. I feel like I have to explain a lot. When someone's like, well, why don't you just disobey it? Just do what you want. I'm like, you really can't. There's a whole bunch of reasons we can't do that. The second, this is slightly going back a little bit to the presentation, Superintendent Cuban, so we can return to this topic as well if we need to. But I appreciate all the data on failure rates, super concerning. One of the things we also look at usually in a normal year are things like Dibble scores. And I'm looking at some of the indicators at the elementary level that we haven't seen. And I'm just wondering if we're going to be starting to see that same kind of data, or is it just such a crazy year you can't even do that? So that was just a question, because I'm really concerned about the kids that were supposed to be learning how to read this year and what that's really looking like in practicality.
We can share that with you for sure. I mean, we've got the interim assessment reports. I'm not going to ask Katie to get it by this Friday. Yeah. But after the break, maybe we can put that, Katie, in our January distance learning report to the board. We can share with you the interim data.
And our Dibbles window, which is now called Acadience, the second assessment is just closing this week, and we'll have all that data so we can look at the first to the second assessment. So we'll have some good information to look at.
Thank you for that. And then I didn't mean to take us away from the conversation about how to respond to this difficult guidance that we have. So any more comments or direction from the board on that to Superintendent Cuban? Trustee Barrett?
I would just like to, I hope all this information gets back to our public health leaders. I mean, can we be sure that what's happened or what we've talked about at the board tonight and the difficulty this has put us in as far as planning for hybrid learning and so on. I mean, I think we need to be sure this is going to get back to them. I don't know what the exact method should be, but we can't be in isolation. I mean, our county is not standing alone here. We're part of one of, 58 in the state? Why should our requirements be any different?
So
Yeah,
it's,
my understanding is that you're doing that, correct, Superintendent Cuban? That you are communicating that?
I am, yes.
so,
Would there be any need for board to do anything else?
I can let the public, the schools liaison know that we had this conversation and encourage them to watch this segment of the board meeting if the board would like me to do that.
I think that would be a good idea. And Trustee Nelson, did you have an idea as well? And I have a proposal after that.
I was just going to suggest that maybe that it should come from the board, seeing as the superintendent has been in discussions with our public health officer, that maybe we write a letter and share our concerns and the challenges that we, basically reiterate what was said tonight.
I'm wondering, so here's a suggestion and you can take it or leave it. Superintendent Cuban, there is another meeting with superintendents pretty soon with the Dr. Corin. It sounded like I'm lost track of something's coming up.
We had one last Friday. And I know public health wants to meet with the education community, which would include board members in the county. I don't know, I think they were going to try and do something before the break, but I don't think, I don't
pull that off.
Going to happen. And I know that they wanted to invite union leaders and administrators and board members to just really an open discussion with education community. So I don't know when that new date is going to be.
So I guess what I'm thinking is, let's pretend for the sake of, benefit of the doubt, that the public health officer put out this guidance without quite understanding what the repercussions would be. And this was just last month, right? And now he has gotten some feedback on what the repercussions are. Deb has expressed it. It's, we're looking at whether or not other counties are doing the same thing. It might be, if I'm being optimistic, that there will be a revision to this. But I would say that if by our January meeting there has not been, then perhaps on our January meeting, there should be a letter that we can endorse at that meeting, being much more specific about the impact. How does that sound to the board? Trustee Nelson?
My concern is that we're running out of time to educate these students. And the longer if there's one thing that I've learned while sitting on the board, putting together schedules and bus routes and all the rest of it is an incredibly large project that I never appreciated before. But as I've learned more about what the district does, it's very, very hard to have this beast start to switch directions. I don't want to wait that long. I think it's
okay.
I think this is really, I see the degradation of the students. It's a big deal. I don't think we should wait. I think we ought to speak up now.
Okay, so then let me propose something else. Doing like a formal letter kind of has to go through a board process and it's kind of complicated. How about if we empower one or two board members to contact Mr. Corin, Dr. Corin themselves, carrying this message in the next couple of weeks? Dead silence. Okay, see a thumbs up from Trustee Mulgard, thumbs up from Trustee Fernandez, thumbs up from, okay, I'm only wondering at Trustee Arkin here and Trustee Asbury, this concept of have a more informal but direct conversation with the public health officer, probably in partnership with Deb.
I'm fine with that. Are you guys willing to do it?
Well, I don't think I would be appropriate. So I would be looking for some other board members to do that.
Because
I'm really busy and I am a County Mendocino employee and I think it's difficult for me to do that. I don't think it would be the right person.
Just a reminder, for the public watching this, our numbers are up. We know that we're in a surge, but Trustee Nelson, I appreciate you saying what you said, which is it takes a tremendous amount of planning to shift gears. And so that's why we're still planning. We're not talking about, going back right now with the numbers the way that they are. I just want to make that clear to everybody. We want to make sure we have a safe return for our staff and our kids, but it does take planning time. And especially with a 1,600 student high school, that is a very large high school, and it takes tremendous planning. And what we have is going to be for the semester.
I think that's a really good point, Superintendent Cuban. And again, for the benefit of our public, just as to be really clear, the way the public health guidance is right now, it would be impossible to open to hybrid learning for middle and high schools, even in the red tier. So we're talking about even in the red tier. That's what we're talking about.
With our previously designed schedule, yes.
Okay.
We could open with a hybrid schedule with 1 period a day in person under the current guidance. So kids would come 1 period a day, twice a week.
Which is a tremendous infrastructure setup for a very small amount of time on campus. So, you know, we would end up having to weigh those cost benefits. We'd probably still do it. But again, I think that the impact of this guidance is really important for our public health officer to understand now, is what I'm hearing from the board, not really wait for it to work itself out, which is one option.
I agree, because I mean, do we know what we're talking about? Did everybody hear that? An hour and a half, twice a freaking week. And for that, we are spending literally 1,000 hours of staff time to make that happen, when they could be doing home visits to make sure that kids are safe and solving their tech problems. And so I'm a county employee currently. It's not great for me to do it, but I would recommend some not county employees like Carolyn Barrett and Tyler Nelson, that they could, be part of the letter writing and request for a meeting along with Superintendent Cuban before Christmas.
Okay, so I'm looking for direction from the board here. I'm going to just, because you haven't weighed in at all, Trustee Asbury, do you have anything to add to this? I don't want to put you on the spot, but just checking in with you.
I think the numbers, like you guys said, are surged. And for me, when the numbers get out of the purple and maybe get into the red, I think that's something to be discussed then. And now you can't see me.
Wave your hand around or something.
Around.
And that the numbers are really high. The numbers are extremely high. And for me, it's all about the safety of the kids. And I don't know. I don't know what the rush is. I think maybe I understand what you guys are saying. I don't know. I just wish the numbers were lower so we could go back to school.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Milgaard, are you waving? I don't know what you're doing with your hand.
I'm trying to figure out my mute button. No,
Okay.
And I just want to assure new Trustee Asbury that we are not talking about going back now. What we're talking about is this is such a big ship to turn around that we have to plan ahead. And so we're talking about what are we going to be doing maybe at the end of January, something like that. But I'm afraid to even say that because then people start quoting me in the newspaper or something. But we know it's not going to be before that. Honestly, we know that.
Okay. So I'm looking for direction from the board here. Do we want to empower 1 or 2 board members to have direct communication with Dr. Corin in advance of our January meeting in partnership with Superintendent Cuban?
Can
Trustee
I ask, what do Carolyn and Tyler think about this?
I'm fine with it. Tyler, if you're up for it.
Yeah, I think it's worth every minute of time the answer is yes.
I think if you two would be willing to do that, I would really appreciate it. I think you're both good ambassadors for that. I think you can explain it well. And our superintendent could use some support from our board members in really emphasizing the impacts that this has on our schools and our kids.
Yes.
Hey.
Okay. So I will still leave room in January if this situation is not moving in a direction that we want it to. I think in January we should, do another consideration of how we want to respond. Okay, Superintendent Cuban.
Thank you very much. And just in summary of the distance learning update and the reopening plan, just to everybody watching, just continue to look out for information that we're sending out. Be flexible. Our staff is working incredibly hard. Most of you have visited classrooms in the virtual environment, and it's pretty amazing, and we need to get our kids back to school as soon as we possibly can, because we know that that is the best place for most kids. And so we're looking forward to that. We're super excited that we get to provide so many after-school in-person activities, and thank you to the board for doing that. And to parents and kids, you know, hope is out there. Hang in there, because hopefully we will all soon be getting vaccinated, those who are choosing to get vaccinated, and we can move on to a different time period in our lives, and all look back on this with some good learning lessons and some things that we never want to do again. So anyway, just thank you all for your support. And Katie, thank you so much for putting this report together. Our staff and parents and kids, hang in there. And I hope you all, I'm sort of doing my superintendent's report. Hope you all have a really relaxing vacation or time off from school.
Okay, we're not at your superintendent report yet, though.
Right.
Okay.
Trustee Van Zandt?
Yes.
I would just like to stipulate that we do have a public comment for this agenda item. I apologize for not getting in sooner.
Oh, and I'm sorry she had to wait so long. So let's invite our public commenter in.
Understood. Admitting her now. Okay. She should be in. This is
Christy Sapien?
yeah, Christy Sapien, and all she needs to do is hit *6 to unmute.
Hi, Christy, can you hear us? You're in our meeting and we'd love to hear from you.
Hi. Yes, I have two sons in the school district, and I'm just, I guess, trying to figure out and understand like what's going on with the reopening. I've been very concerned about what I've been hearing about plans to reopen soonish. I don't know if it's January or what still, but from what I've seen, it doesn't seem like teachers are really being able to choose fully remote. I don't know, maybe that's changed. I know we had chosen full remote for our kids. And so I guess I'm just kind of wanting to express my concern for reopening the schools, for my concern for the community, because I feel like it's going to create a lot of community spread when we're already kind of dealing with a lot of that right now. Kids are often asymptomatic, so they're not going to have fevers. So, you know, even temperature checks and everything and masks aren't going to be super helpful in those cases. And I feel like the teachers are going to be the ones in the most danger of some really bad repercussions with the schools reopening. And I guess I'm just really wanting to make sure that, you know, the teachers are getting the option to stay full remote, just like the students are. And I know I for one, want to be able to keep our teachers and not lose them to in-person. I know a lot of our teachers fall into the high-risk category or have, you know, high-risk family members that they live with, that they're not going to want to go into in-person, you know, teaching. So I just wanted to voice my concern for all that, and hope that you guys keep that all in mind. And, you know, yeah, I lost my train of thought there, but I just very concerned as a parent and a community member. And, you know, I have friends that are teachers and such, and I just am concerned for all. And I'm feeling like a reopening anytime soon with our numbers is going to be, you know, I kind of feel like it's irresponsible to the community, just the way the numbers are right now, and kids do get and spread it. And there's been more studies coming out now that even asymptomatic children who get COVID have been having health complications that are potentially lifelong. Obviously, there hasn't been enough time to know that for sure, but it's not looking great for kids either. And that.
Okay.
Hello?
No, I'm
sorry, I couldn't hear.
I was thinking you were near your finishing. Are you near the end here?
Yes, I am. But
okay.
then I thought I heard you say, sorry.
No, that's okay. So we appreciate your public comment. And just to be clear, we are not making any decisions on reopening tonight. We actually didn't make any decisions on reopening last meeting either. And that there is not currently an intention to reopen substantially while we're in the purple tier. So,
okay.
Yeah. And I want to make sure you understand that.
Okay. Yeah. I honestly, the emails have been kind of confusing, I guess would be a word for it. I've not really known what's going on. I'm like, well, what? And I know some schools can get, the papers to open or the waivers. And so I wasn't sure what UUSD was planning on doing with all that, and just kind of got me a little antsy about everything.
Okay, well, thank you for your comment, and continue to read all the confusing emails. I'm a parent too. I know what you mean. So there's a lot of information going out there, and the planning time for schools is very, very long. So we often ask information from parents before the decisions are made. So we appreciate your public comment tonight. Thank you, and thanks for sitting through this meeting.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. All right. Bye. Okay, so this was not an action item, Superintendent Cuban. It was just an update. Okay, we appreciate it. And any other comments from board members, or I'm gonna have us take a 5 minute, 5 minute break. Is that okay? Okay. I can't. My phone died, and I don't have a phone, so I don't. What time is it? Anybody?
24.
Okay, so let's come back at 8:30.
Got it. Thank you.
6 minutes. 8:30. Okay. Thanks.
Please make sure you mute.
We are now taking a short recess.
Okay, it's 8:30. So I'm looking for our trustees to be back. And I see Trustee Fernandez, Trustee Asbury, Trustee Nelson, Trustee Barrett. And I don't yet see Trustee Mulgard and Arkin. So I will, oh, there's Trustee Arkin. Just going to give Trustee Mulgard another minute or two. We are half an hour behind my plans. So I'm guessing we'll end this meeting at 9:15 to 9:20 now.
All right.
Trustee Mulgard, are you present? I'm going to give her one more minute and then we'll start without her. And actually, I don't see Superintendent Cuban. Are you present as well? There's Trustee Mulgard. Okay, I see Superintendent Cuban. So let's get started. We'll reconvene at 8:31. And we are on item E1, the 2020-2021 first interim budget report. And I think that's probably Mr. Bergman.
Yes, we haven't thrown enough numbers and statistics and facts at you yet tonight, so we'll throw some more at you. So first interim. We'll start with kind of a quick agenda. We'll review the budget cycle. We'll talk about what's new with first interim, talk about our general fund and the multi-year projections, talk about our other funds, and then talk about what's next, which is perhaps the most interesting part. So our famous budget cycle diagram. We are here. We are about halfway through the fiscal year. We are at first interim. This is the first time we've really looked at our 2020-21 budget since we adopted it back in June. We did come back to you with a 45-day revision in August, but this is really typically the first time we really look at our budget. It's the first time we know how we finished the prior year, which is an important part of how do we begin this year affects how we end this year, obviously. So anyway, that's where we are in the budget cycle. Uncertainty is really the theme. It might have been better to have shrouded that little diagram on the last slide in some fog or something, because we really don't know a whole lot. In my 15 or 16 years of doing first interim reports, I think we know less now about this year's budget and future year's budgets than we've ever known at first interim. It's kind of interesting. We've been very focused on spending all of the one-time pandemic funds, and that spending that money definitely skews what other money we've spent. So we have not spent a lot of our general fund money because we've been busy spending this money. As we talked earlier, will there be more pandemic money this next week? I'm not sure. Will there be more after January 20th? I think possibly, but we don't know until we know. When will we reopen to site-based instruction? As we talked in the last few minutes, we really don't know, right? But that has an impact on our general fund budget. So we really chose not to revise our budgets much for first interim because we just don't know enough, right? We could argue that we're going to spend everything we've got budgeted, or we could argue that we're going to spend really not much more than we have budgeted today. And so we've just kind of taken a wait and see approach. And again, the toughest part maybe for where we're trying to be right now is what's going to happen in 21-22. We should be making some staffing decisions pretty soon here for next year. We have no inkling of what the governor is going to announce in his January budget proposal, which is constitutionally due by January 10th. So it's possible we're going to come to you in a hurry at the January board meeting and say, look, we just found this out and we've got to react quickly. I don't anticipate that. The news seems to be pretty positive coming out of Sacramento. But again, nothing would surprise us anymore, right? So we just have to kind of be ready to adjust on the fly. Looking at our general fund, you kind of see how it's changed over the budget cycle so far. Again, as I mentioned, the first number that's really kind of important is how did we finish last year? We thought we'd finish 2019-20 with $3.5 million in the general fund. We actually finished with 5.4. We got much healthier, and that was the pandemic has been good for our general fund budget. It's the only thing it's been good for, but it's been good for our general fund budget. We've spent a lot less money than we had anticipated. Otherwise, revenues are up from what we thought they would be. That had to do with the governor rolling back the 10% reduction that we built our initial budget off of. Expenditures are up some. That makes sense because we did give a 2.79% raise. You approved that back in November. But some of our other expenditures looks like, yeah, right now, based on budget, they look high. We will not spend everything we have budgeted. You get down to the bottom line, you see we're predicting a fund ending balance of 187,000 in the general fund. And we think we're deficit spending 5.2 million. I can pretty much promise you we will not deficit spend 5.2 million when all is said and done. Typically at first interim, we always show a structural spending deficit. And we've talked about how do we get that out of our first interim budgets in the future, because that seems to be a kind of a regular thing. But things always improve from here. I'd like to not put this scare in you in the future, so maybe things we can look a little better at this point as well. Regardless, based on where we think we're going to finish, we think we're going to finish the year with an 8.5% reserve if we finish the way this projects. Again, I don't think it will. That's just under the 9% board mandated reserve. It would still leave us in pretty good stead, all things considered. Moving to the multi-year projections, where we kind of look at the next 2 years. Again, for 21-22 and 22-23, we really know nothing at this time. We don't know if there's going to be any kind of a COLA, if the state's going to reduce our funding in any way. We believe we'll be funded on our 2019-2020 ADA in 2021-22. That was a very good year for us. If it plays out that way, that helps our budget tremendously, but that's not confirmed yet. So interesting times for us. But again, based on what we think today, we will not really deficit spend in 2021-22, and we won't in 22-23. And when I go to the next slide, you'll see that we'll finish next year with a little bit over an 8% raise and over our 3% reserve in 22-23. And again, that's kind of how things looked at first interim last year. That third year out looked kind of scary, and then it gets better as it goes on.
And Steve, you said 8% raise. I just want to clarify that it's 8% reserve. So
thank you.
Sorry, everybody, but we don't know what that's going to hold, but it is reserve.
Reserve. Thank you very much. Definitely a misquote.
Can I ask a question on this slide here?
Sure, please.
So you have the actual reserve percentage for last year was 13.72, and then it goes to this 8 point. Can you explain that?
Sure. So the first thing I put on here is just to give you a comparison. Again, first interim is kind of our least rosy budget outlook for the year.
Oh.
Last year at this time, we thought we would deficit spend almost $2 million for the year when all was said and done. And we thought we would finish the year with 8.74% in reserves.
Mm-hmm.
When all was said and done, we did not deficit spend. We finished to the good by over $4 million, and our reserves are 13.72%.
Okay, thank you.
So it's just kind of trying to take some of the alarm out of this. First interim always looks bad.
Although it doesn't even look that bad.
Right. Given everything we're going through, it could definitely be worse. So again, I think we will finish 2020-21 much better than this shows. We have roughly 10 million budgeted outside of salaries and benefits from the general fund. At this point in the year, we've spent or encumbered barely half of that. So to think that we'll spend that other half over the next 6 months is really hard to fathom. But as soon as I say that, something crazy is going to happen. So we'll continue to be conservative. Brief look at our other funds. You see all the funds have a positive balance or zero balance as they're supposed to. You'll notice the adult education fund did change somewhat from how we projected it to be to where it stands now. That was because they had some carryover funds they're spending. The cafeteria fund is looking actually much healthier, going from no reserve at the end of the year to almost $300,000. That is maybe the other semi good news in the pandemic, is that we've been funded at a much higher rate for our meals from the state and the federal government during this time. The other funds are all kind of doing what they're supposed to do. Nothing really alarming or concerning there. So really, what's next is the question. Second interim is next. That doesn't come to you until March. Well, that's too late to make certificated staffing reductions for 2021-22. So if something crazy were to happen with the governor's budget announcement, we're gonna have to come back and react pretty quickly. There are really 3 areas for concern in my mind right now. There's a state education budget that we've talked about. Is there going to be a reduction in funding? We don't believe so. Will we see a decline in enrollment for 2021-22? We're down roughly 77 students this year. Do we think, will we get those students back when we come back to in-person learning? I think we can make that argument. We don't know for sure. And then there's also the potential opening of a new charter school. We received a petition back on October 2nd. We'll be acting on that at the next board meeting in January. Depending on when that opens, that will have an impact on our enrollment and our ADA as well. But again, with that hold harmless from the state for ADA, we have some protection for next year, regardless of whether or not we lose some students. It's just I want to understand that a little better and make sure that doesn't get changed in the new budget proposal.
Steve, can I ask a question about this slide?
Please.
My understanding is that parents who can afford it, maybe not all 70 of the children that we lost, but parents who can afford it have opted for private schools because they are doing in-person learning. Is that malarkey, or is there some truth to that?
We believe that to be true for some of the cases, absolutely. So then the question becomes, is when we reopen to in-person learning, do those students come back? And that's a great question.
In our analysis, we've lost about 30 students to private schools this year, which has not been our trend as a district. It's been the other way. So we have lost 30.
So if you're a family of means and you want your child to have in-person education, you can pay for it. But if you're not of means, you stick with the school district and do distance learning.
Yep.
Sorry, I just.
It's another example, yeah, another example of inequity in this whole situation, for sure. Is it, I mean, as long as we're pausing for a moment.
The other thing
go ahead, Trustee Mulgard.
Oh, I was just going to say, in addition to that, what Trustee Nelson was saying about some children might return for next year's planning, isn't there also going to be a rush on pre-K and K because there were so many parents who didn't bother starting school when it was such an odd format? So I would actually anticipate us not needing to be held harmless, but that we'd actually be increasing enrollment.
That is possible, and we'd always be funded on the higher of the two. That's the nice thing in the way the state's budget works. It's the protection you have. If you are, you're either funded on last year's or this year's, whichever is higher. So we have that.
But what your current numbers you're planning on? What, on last year's?
On the 1920 ADA, correct.
Which you said was a good year.
It was a very good year. So.
Okay, well, that's not so far then. Okay, thank you.
So you stopped sharing screen, but was that the end? I didn't know.
Yes. Yeah, that was the last slide. Yep.
Okay.
So it's really just next steps. You know, by not formally taking any action to reduce staffing now, there is a risk, but there's so little information to act on right now.
And Steve, I'll just add, Steve and Nicole are busy doing enrollment projections for next year. And again, it's going to probably be our hardest year for enrollment projections, just because of what's happened with distance learning, and we could possibly be authorizing a charter school. So it'll be tricky, but we'll do our best on doing accurate projections. And hopefully with just natural attrition of retirements and everything, we'll be able to not have to do any layoffs.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, so I'll take a moment. Steve, for me, I don't even know how to evaluate what's going on right now, and you may feel the same way. But if you were a board member, and I know you're going to be looking at this from a very fiscally conservative place, what would you be focusing on as a board member in this moment where it's hard to tell what's happening?
I think the district has a history, even before I got here, which I was grateful to inherit, of being conservative and being smart fiscally. We know that every dollar we save now helps us down the road. We don't spend if we don't need to. We question every expenditure. Again, salaries and benefits are the biggest piece of what we do. We're going to keep trying to spend those pandemic dollars first, and that keeps that general fund pressure off. Anything extra we can carry over into next year and the year after helps us if there is a hiccup, if there is a bit more of a decline in enrollment than we project, or if the state funding does take a hit at some point. So I think feeling good that we had a 13.7% reserve coming into the year. That board policy says we want to try to maintain a 9% reserve. And if we fall below that, we're going to work to get back to that. Those are really important things that not every district has or does. So from my standpoint, second interim is going to be really interesting. That's I think really where we're going to have to really make sure we understand what we're heading into for 21-22. And again, if we get a bad surprise in January, we'll come back to the January board meeting and say, okay, plan B, what are we going to do? Here's our recommendations. So I don't know that I really answered your question, but it's
Well,
just
you
a
answered it
crazy
like
time.
a CBO, so which is what you are, and that's what I would expect. So, okay. Thank you. Are there any other board questions or comments before I understand we just accept this report? We're not approving anything. Is that right? Superintendent Cuban, and you are muted, but.
No,
I believe that you approved the first interim budget.
with the positive certification, right? We could, if we were below 3% in that third year out, we'd have to talk about qualified or negative. There's no reason for us to do that. We're not in that kind of shape.
Okay. Is there any board members who wants to make a motion to accept the first interim budget report with a positive certification?
I so move.
I'll second.
So I'm going to say moved by trustee Nelson, and I'm going to say seconded by trustee Arkin, even though it was a tie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Bergman, for that report. And we'll move on to item E2, which is extension of timeline to grant denied charter petition for the Sunel Valley Academy. Is that you,
Great.
Superintendent Cuban, or maybe no? Still Steve. Okay, carry on.
Sure. So as I alluded to in the prior presentation, we did receive a charter petition back on October 2nd for a new charter school. We had 90 days to act upon that as a board. That 90th day would put us at December 30th. We are allowed to ask for an extension, and the Sunel Valley Academy Board did agree to that 30-day extension with us. So now we have until January 30th to approve or deny their petition. So we'd like to come back to you in January with that action. Part of that action, we are required to publish our findings as a district within 15 days prior to that meeting. We'll be getting those published hopefully by Friday of this week. So we can take the next step in January. And you're just approving the extension tonight.
Okay, so if I just want to reiterate the timeline, then you will publish your findings by sometime soon.
By Friday the 18th.
And these are findings that the district does without board approval. It's your work.
It's
correct?
our review of the petition.
Okay.
Correct.
And then are we having a special meeting to grant or deny the petition, or are we doing it as part of our January meeting?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that one yet.
Our thought was we do it at the regular meeting, but we can talk more about that.
Okay. And our regular meeting is what date?
January 14th, I believe.
Okay, but we have until the 30th. Is that correct now?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Okay, any questions from the board on that? You know, I believe the copies of the petition are available. Some of us have seen them in hard copy. They were very long. And we'll look forward to seeing the district's review as well. Are there any questions before we do we need to approve that extension of the timeline?
Yes.
Okay, trustee Fernandez.
I had a question. So you post your findings, and then what happens to your findings? Do they change something, or they just read the findings? Is there a process?
They cannot change their petition at this point. So you'll be acting in part based on their petition and our findings. And then typically what would happen is if you were to grant approval, we would work with the charter to develop an MOU to iron out all the kinks that we identified and things like that before they were actually formally approved.
Do they get to refute the findings? I mean, is it like a audit or a grand jury report type of thing, or not?
I think they can respond, yes.
Okay, but it's not like a formal process. We do the findings, they can respond if they want, and then we grant or deny the petition?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so can I have a motion to is that what we're doing? A motion to accept the extension of the timeline to grant or deny the charter petition? I think trustee Barrett is trying to move it, but she was muted, so.
Did I unmute?
You are on mute now.
I so move.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so moved by trustee Barrett, seconded by trustee Mulgard to approve the extension of the timeline to grant or deny the charter petition for the Snell Valley Academy. And I know this is a lot of work for all of you, so I do want to extend appreciation to the charter school for agreeing to extend that timeline. That was kind of them. My understanding is they didn't have to do that. Is that right? So I hope we can, if you can convey to that group that the board's really appreciative of this. I know it's been really hard, a lot of work for your staff. So I'm grateful for them for that flexibility.
We are.
Okay. So I think that's the end of that agenda item. Coming up, we have E3.
Are we voting?
Oh, thank you. Sorry. So there's a motion on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Seeing none. Any abstentions? None. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, B. So, okay, we're moving on to items E3 through E18. These are first readings of a number of policies. And trustee Asbury, just for your benefit, this is something that happens fairly regularly, and most of this, and for the public, the policy changes are often to reflect new state laws. They're clearly laid out in all the board policies, but typically we don't go into great detail with each board policy. But if there's any questions or comments about any of them, now would be the time to say that. So we're in items E3 through E18. Any questions or comments from the board? Superintendent Cuban?
I just want to comment on E13, the review of our youth suicide prevention policy. I want to thank our partners for giving us feedback on this policy. We consulted with our health advisory committee. We've sent it out to our agency partners to give us feedback. And we are adopting more of the model policy that is on the California Department of Education site. And just a huge thanks to our counseling team and Jason Iverson and Scott Paulin and Chris Kenny for all of their research that they've done. So this is a little bit out of sync, but we needed to update it. And so anyway, I just wanted to thank our partners for giving us feedback.
Okay, thank you for that. If there's no questions or comments from the board, I'm trying to remember, I believe we do not take action on this first reading. Am I correct?
No, bring it back
Okay.
to the next meeting.
Okay. So then I'm going to move to item F1, which is the superintendent's report. Superintendent Cuban?
You heard a lot of what we've been up to with the distance learning report. So I'll just say a few more things. We're super excited. We have food distribution tomorrow and around holidays, or not tomorrow, on Wednesday, sorry. We're planning to do a holiday box that has a turkey or ham. We've recruited some of our high school leadership students to spread some joy and spirit. They're all scheduled in not to distribute food, but to cheer on cars as they're passing along Despina and Low Gap. So just to spread a little goodwill and cheer. So we're excited about that. And I don't know if you caught the choir performance on Friday. That's a ton of very challenging work on the part of our students and our choir director, Josh Small. So just really grateful to have seen that and listened to those beautiful voices still singing. Not in person, of course, because we know that singing is not a good activity in person. So we're glad that we got to do that virtually. We've got our mock trial team. Mason talked about that. Most of the schools have dropped out. They're doing a virtual competition with distilling goodness. So we're excited about that. And we'll let you know the date when we set it. And instead of visions of sugar plums dancing in my head, I have visions of vaccines dancing in my head. So there's a lot of talk in our county about vaccinations, and our county is due to get some vaccines and soon for our, and the state has put out not the timeline, but the order in which people will be getting vaccines. And currently teachers and school staff are prioritized in the second tier. So we are looking forward to being part of that. And I don't know when that's going to happen though. but today they were talking about potentially staff being moved into the first tier, not in Mendocino County, but in the state. So the county is following all the state guidelines on that. So that would be exciting.
It would be.
Gives me a lot of hope for what our future is going to look like. And I think that's all I'll say, except we're gearing up for a holiday break. And I hope that people get outside if it's not raining and get their kids outside and get some rest from screens. So, thank you to all of you for all of your support. I'm really grateful to work in this district with our amazing staff and community and parents and kids. And so I'm really grateful. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Superintendent Cuban? All right, well, thank you, Deb. And I'm glad that you're going to get a break and that we're all going to get a break starting next week. So great. We're on item F2, board members report. The purpose is to add knowledge to the board. Does any board member have anything to add to our knowledge?
I'm not sure that this is adding knowledge, but I would like to suggest to the Cuban, Tyler Nelson, Carolyn Barrett group that is going to meet with the public health officer or send a letter, that they also talk about the vaccine, because there could be all sorts of local things that we're not aware of. And we just want them knowing that we're really advocating for our teachers and school staff. And I just don't want any silence on that for them to think that maybe some other group should go first. I know it's a state rule, but I think local advocacy is going to be important on that issue as well. Thank you.
I agree with Trustee Mogard. If we are in, if you all are in the second phase, let's be at the front line of the second phase, or, if there's different parts of the phase, it would be, good to advocate to get as far ahead as possible. Any other board members wanting to add knowledge to the board? Okay, so item G1 was removed. We did not have any student readmissions. So we have a number of consent items on the agenda in section H. Can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I so move.
Thank you, Trustee Nelson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Trustee Mogard. So can we, there's a motion to approve the consent items. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? No. All right. Hey, it's like 8:58. Not bad. So we have we have planning right now. Agenda planning is when, Ms. Ornelas?
Well, we're looking at either January 5th or January 6th. And the time frame, I'm not sure it can happen at noon on either one of those dates. So I need to see what other calendars, what your calendar might work for you, Megan.
So what days of the week are those?
Tuesday and a Wednesday.
I think either one would work. I don't know. I don't have my work calendar in front of me, but I can make either one work, probably.
But you could make it work at a time other than noon.
Oh, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I think so. Why don't we see who else is interested while I check this? Is there any other board members who have not done agenda planning in a while and would like to? And why am I getting weird feedback? Is that me?
I don't know. I can do it.
Okay, B. Okay, so let's do B and Tyler and Superintendent Cuban.
I was just going to add, Deb, if you needed to move my Tuesday meeting, I'm sure we could probably do that to make noon work if it works better for board members.
Doesn't matter for me.
Okay. Yeah, whatever works.
So it looks to me like I'm checking my work calendar, and noon or afternoon works for me on either of those days.
Okay. Well, we could say 1 o'clock on the 5th, if that works for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that work for you, Trustee Nelson?
It does.
Okay, so agenda planning is at 1 o'clock on January 5th with Trustee Nelson, Trustee Arkin, and myself.
Yes. Okay.
All right, and so far we don't have any special board meetings planned, and our next board meeting is January 14th.
Sounds good.
Okay. There's no other business? Yeah. Trustee Arkin, did you have something to say?
Good. No, good job.
Okay,
Good
well,
job.
Trustee Nelson,
Congratulations on your first meeting.
thank you.
Well, not you. You've been to these before. Susan, congratulations.
Oh, not me. Susan.
That's great.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, good night, everybody.